Hello everyone. Today we are leaving the Baroque era behind and entering a new world, the Classical era. This period, roughly the second half of the 18th century, saw a massive cultural shift centered in one city, Vienna. Vienna was the perfect melting pot. Geographically, it stood at the crossroads of Germany, Bohemia, Hungary, and Italy. Politically, it was the capital of the mighty Habsburg Empire. But what really made Vienna special was its leadership. It flourished under the Empress Maria Theresa and her son, Emperor Joseph II. Joseph was what we call an enlightened monarch. In his short but golden reign, he emancipated the peasantry, supported education, and encouraged a free press. In a city of only 150,000 people, there were 300 newspapers. This liberal atmosphere drew talent like a magnet. Haydn worked nearby, Mozart moved there from Salzburg, and a young Beethoven traveled there from Germany to make his mark. They were all breathing the air of the Enlightenment. This was an intellectual movement rooted in a faith in reason. It started with science, think Newton and Galileo, but in the 18th century it shifted to social issues. People began to believe that reason could solve social problems. They fought for social justice and public morality. Religion, for the first time in European history, stopped being the dominant force in everyone's mind. Key figures like Voltaire and Rousseau championed these ideas. They argued for social justice and the natural rights of man. This even crossed the ocean. America's Declaration of Independence is a direct product of this Enlightenment thinking. Now, how did this affect art? In the Baroque era, art was meant to impress you or instruct you. But in the 18th century, art was expected to please. We see this in the Rococo style, light, frothy, and decorative. In music, this translated to the divertimento, a piece designed purely to divert and amuse. Composers like Mozart and Haydn were writing high art, yes, but they never forgot that their primary job was to provide entertainment. This was the first time in history that great music was frankly presented as entertainment. One of the loudest voices in this new era was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was a philosopher, a novelist, and a self-taught composer. He viewed civilization as corrupting and argued for a return to the natural. In music, this meant attacking the artificial complexity of Baroque opera. He hated the complicated plots and the high-flown virtuosity. He wanted opera to portray real people experiencing real emotions. This led to the rise of comic opera, or opera buffa. Unlike the serious Baroque operas about Roman emperors, these operas featured middle-class characters, servants, and everyday situations. It was the musical equivalent of the novel, which was also exploding in popularity at this time. Both genres focused on sharp, realistic observations of contemporary life. Another huge shift was economic. This is the era of the public concert. Before this, music happened in church or in a rich person's palace. But now, we see the first concert halls being built, like the Holywell Music Room in Oxford, which is still used today. Concerts were funded by subscriptions. This gave a huge boost to orchestral music. Symphonies and concertos became the main events. Now let's talk about the music itself. If Baroque music was rigorous and consistent, classical music was all about pleasing variety. First, rhythm. In Baroque music, a piece usually sets a rhythmic pattern and sticks to it. In classical music, the rhythm is highly flexible. The music might stop suddenly, surge forward, or glide smoothly. It's less predictable and more exciting. Second, dynamics. We see a similar flexibility in volume. Instead of just loud or soft, composers started using crescendos, getting louder, and diminuendos, getting softer. This desire for dynamic variety led to the rise of the piano. Unlike the harpsichord, which plucked the strings at a constant volume, the piano struck them with hammers, allowing the player to control the dynamics with their touch. Its name literally means soft loud. The classical orchestra also grew up and became a standardized machine. The strings remained the heart of the group, but the woodwinds, flutes, oboes, and bassoons were given defined roles to provide specific tone colors. French horns and trumpets were added for harmonic support. Finally, let's look at the nuts and bolts of the music: melody, texture, and form. The demand for natural music meant a demand for tunes. Classical melodies are simple, singable, and catchy. They often sound like folk songs. The complexity of Baroque polyphony was thrown out. The dominant texture became homophony, a single clear melody with a simple chordal accompaniment. But to keep this simple music from becoming boring, composers relied on strict forms. Themes were repeated so you wouldn't miss them. Multiple cadences were used to clearly signal the end of a section. Standard patterns like sonata form and rondo form gave the audience a roadmap. They knew exactly what to expect, which allowed composers to tame the contrasts and keep the music elegant. So, in summary, the classical era was about moving from the artificial to the natural, from the complex to the clear, and from the church to the public concert hall. It was an age that believed music should be elegant, pleasing, and intelligible to everyone. Now please listen to the deep dive.
Okay, let's talk about a time when philosophy didn't just, stay in books. It actually changed the music people listened to.
Right.
We're going to dive into music and the Enlightenment. We're trying to figure out how we got from the really complex sound of Bach to the much more, natural feel of Mozart and even Beethoven.
It's a huge shift, and I think to really get it, you have to picture the setting. You have to look at Vienna in the late 18th century.
That was the place to be, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the Silicon Valley for music back then.
Exactly. It was the absolute epicenter, and a big reason for that was the ruler, Emperor Joseph II.
Ah, the enlightened ruler.
That's him. He freed the peasantry, allowed a free press, and really pushed back on the power of the church. That created this atmosphere of freedom where guys like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven could just flourish.
So it's this perfect storm in Vienna. But was it just there? I mean, you've got the American Declaration of Independence happening, talking about the pursuit of happiness.
And that phrase is everything. The pursuit of happiness. It wasn't just Jefferson thinking that. It was a major shift in how people saw the world. And if you want to find the philosophical source for a lot of this, you have to talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Right, the big thinker.
Yeah.
He argued that civilization had sort of corrupted everyone.
He did. He thought we needed to get back to a more natural state. And he applied that idea to everything, including music.
So he didn't like the fancy stuff. I read he absolutely hated the big, complicated Baroque operas of his day.
Oh, he despised them. He thought they were totally artificial, all about, distant gods and mythological heroes.
Yeah.
He said music should be about real people with real feelings.
That sounds a lot like what was happening in books at the time. You get novels like Tom Jones, which are just about, regular people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That demand for realism, it jumps right from the page to the stage. It creates opera, buffa comic opera.
So instead of gods, you get Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro.
You get servants outsmarting their masters, you get scheming wives, you get drama you can actually relate to. It's funny, it's human.
Okay, but this is the part I get stuck on. How do you make music sound more relatable? I mean, you listen to Bach, and it feels like a complex math problem.
It is. That's called polyphony. You have all these different melodic lines weaving in and out, all sort of fighting for your attention.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and it's not very natural. So the Enlightenment composers moved towards something called homophony.
Which means?
It's much simpler. Think of it like this. You have one clear, singable melody that's your main character, and everything else is just the backup band, the accompaniment.
Okay. So it's designed to be clear.
Designed to be understood by everyone, not just a few experts. It was a democratization of sound, really. You can hum a Mozart tune. Trying to hum a Bach fugue is difficult.
Chuckles. Yeah, you might hurt yourself.
Right. I mean, Mozart wrote variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It doesn't get more simple or natural than that. But simple didn't mean boring. And that's where technology made a huge difference, the invention of the fortepiano.
Because the older harpsichords couldn't get louder or softer.
Exactly. They just plucked the string at one volume. But the piano could whisper and it could roar. It allowed for crescendo and diminuendo.
A real game changer.
It was a whole new emotional tool. There are stories of audiences hearing a long, slow crescendo for the very first time and literally rising out of their seats with the tension.
Wow, it's basically emotional manipulation with sound.
It is, and the orchestra grew to support that. It wasn't just strings anymore. Suddenly you have clarinets, oboes, brass instruments, all there to add color and mood to mirror human emotions.
So who was sitting in those seats getting manipulated? It wasn't just the aristocrats anymore, was it?
No, and that's the final piece. You see the rise of the public concert. Music moves out of the private courts and into halls where anyone could buy a ticket.
So if you're listening, the takeaway here is that classical music wasn't just about sounding pretty. It was a direct reflection of a society that was starting to value clarity and public enjoyment over dense complexity.
And that brings us right back to the pursuit of happiness. Music, for the first time, wasn't just for praising God or impressing a king. Its goal was to entertain, to move you, to improve your quality of life.
The idea that feeling good was in itself a good thing. A great reminder that sometimes the most profound thing music can do is just make you happy. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.